My name is Johnny Struzeski. This is my Chapter 27 Teach Back. Chapter 27 is School Social Work Practice with Families Across Multi-Tiered Systems of Support. So first things first, really just looking at parent and family engagement. It's been proven to support positive educational and social emotional outcomes for children, which can lead to further academic successes. Studies have also shown that parental involvement can increase intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, increases academic achievement, as well as self-regulation skills. Parental engagement may look different amongst different races because of privilege and oppression. This is thinking about how a black family might respond to trauma versus a white family, or what that trauma might look like. So really also working to understand how intersectionality impacts families and their students' education, looking at identities and how it affects the systems that they are a part of. So first things first, creating partnerships and healthy relationships. An important element of family-centered practice is creating partnerships and helping relationships with students and their families. This really starts to mend the gap between school and home. Furthermore, we can use the strengths of families to support the students' learning. Before school social workers can develop partnerships and helping relationships, they must acknowledge disparities in power and recognize the prevalence of trauma and the lived experiences of their families that they're working with. And that just really reinforces that we should encourage the involvement of family and really reach out to them as they are masters of their own life and experiences. So really looking at addressing trauma as well as helping families to respond to that trauma. So you can start by implementing school-wide trauma-informed policies. Furthermore, helping families to build on their strengths and resilience, and not necessarily just focusing on the past or negative things that have happened to them, their negative experiences. We can train staff within schools to respond with trauma-informed responses. So this would mean recognizing that not all students come in with food, not all students have had a good night's sleep, and just understanding that students may not always be at their best. And you can also look at the pathology mindset versus the resiliency mindset. A pathology mindset is defining family members a pathology mindset, which is defining family members' diagnostic label and implying that something is wrong with them, as compared to a resilient mindset that views families presenting difficulties, behaviors, and emotions as responses to surviving trauma. So also helping these families respond to trauma. Families are experts of their own experiences. You must allow time for students and families to work through traumas on their own, as well as understanding the role that environment plays on family trauma, and how that trauma has come about. So establishing trust with families. So before working with families, you should always reflect on your own experiences and thoughts regarding familial norms. As mentioned, culture, geographical location, all these can play significant roles, or have very different familial norms. So also use active listening skills and positive body languages. Show the families that you're listening, that you're open to conversation. It's okay to be vulnerable, and use empathy. It's important to use empathy. An example of this is if a family asks you for a resource and you're not sure where to find one or what you can do. It's okay to say I don't know, and let me see what I can find out. When school social workers frame courage to be born from vulnerability, they empower families to share their needs, questions, and desires more openly. The next one is looking at strategies, different tiers of strategies to create partnerships and helping relationships. Tier 1 interventions actively work to promote trauma-informed policies, professional development that expands staff's capacity for trauma-informed care, as well as allowing for students, families, and school staff to learn how to manage and cope with traumatic experiences. Tier 2 interventions work collaboratively to support families or students experiencing trauma. You can use a multidisciplinary approach. You can gather input from other folks in the school that know more about the family or guardian and can give more information on their background or their history. We can also create positive and meaningful relationships with families through meetings or conversations, simple emails that celebrate successes. So those are a few. And for tier 3, always work to strengthen empathy skills, professional development, reading books, and just working with the students and having an open mind. Maintain confidentiality when talking about students. It would be an absolute shame to be breaching confidentiality and a student finds out about it, and then that would cut off a lot of the trust. You must also reflect on your own privilege, power, and oppression and how it shows up when working with families. As well as don't talk badly behind a student's back or badly about students or their families. Um, Building a school community that values and empowers families. So sanctuary schools are a whole school approach that is focused on opposing structural and systemic violence and discipline and provides a framework to build anti-racist and equity-focused school communities that value and empower families. So they're an intervention, like I said, that is focused on opposing structural and systemic violence. They have a commitment to protecting undocumented immigrants and their families, as well as families recognizing that families are experts of their own life, and they also have the solution to their own problems, and it is important to help them just work through it to find those solutions. We also must acknowledge racial and ethnic differences. As a school community that empowers and values families, they must acknowledge their differences and celebrate diversity amongst families. Professional development should also identify how families are affected by systemic oppression and power, as well as working for training the staff to understand and recognize those differences. Failure to reflect on race, culture, and power often contributes to colorblind school cultures. Colorblind school cultures can develop beliefs and attitudes that blame poor parenting as the underlying cause of disruptive behaviors and ignore the systemic effects of poverty and racism. Colorblind school cultures negatively influence families when school professionals associate disrespect in the classroom as a lack of discipline in the home. So also considering how culture plays a role in the delivery of mental health services. For example, Latinx and indigenous families are disproportionately affected by prolonged grief, paranoia, low self-worth, substance abuse, and suicide. Black families experience trauma at higher rates, yet they are much less likely to seek therapy or mental health resources. Families with greater socioeconomic status and access to resources are more likely to have higher academic expectations of their students. Regarding mental health services, families that are well off may also face a bias in regard to not needing help, even when their children report levels of distress that would be categorized as worthy of intervention. So next slide, we're looking at advocating for self-care among educators. If educators aren't taking care of themselves and they're not mentally fit, then it makes it very difficult to be helping other students and their families. They should be reflective of their overall health and self-care, mental health and physical health. School staff also may experience burnout, secondary traumatic stress, and compassion fatigue. Educators should set boundaries that separates work and home. So turning off your computer at home, not checking email, not having it linked to your personal phone. They should also identify self-care routines and identify strong social connections that can support them. So looking at strategies to link families to school and community supports. Tier 1, we can always ask families to share stories and experiences about their history in the school or community. They can do that at teacher meeting or parent-teacher meetings as well. They can also use books, artwork, achievements, and other resources that reflect the families and their culture. They can also utilize or use parent-teacher conferences to learn more about families and the cultures that they serve. You should also have a diverse staff at the school, staff and faculty at the school. Representation is a big thing, so seeing other folks that look like you or talk like you might make you feel a little bit more comfortable within the school. We also must promote the idea of self-care to the school staff, as well as create parent and family-led activities to create a voice for the families. Tier 2 interventions, so identifying translation resources for students and their families, making sure that the families can understand what is happening with their students and their education. Participate in out-of-school activities such as celebrations and community gatherings, as well as provide trainings to school staff that work with culturally diverse students and their families. It's also important to celebrate student successes with family members. Tier 3 interventions. Families are the experts of their family's experiences, and it is important to be aware of personal as well as implicit biases. So just reflecting on your own biases and your own thoughts, as well as your own privilege, power, and oppression. Demonstrate respect and cultural humility when working with students, their families, and other members of the community. We can also create ways to gather family members' voices and ideas when creating goals for the student, and be aware of environmental and relational stressors that may affect a family. It's important to link families to school and family supports, school and social supports. Academic achievement gaps are closed when schools, families, and community resources work together. And family engagement liaisons play a crucial role in connecting families to resources such as housing assistance, food pantries, and free clothing. Connecting these families to school and social supports is crucial for two reasons. Children spend a majority of their time in school, and two, families are important determinants of their children's attitudes, behaviors, health, and development during their educational process. Just linking that gap, students do spend a lot of time at school, and I use the book as my source. I forgot to cite it down.